Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Let's give it a round of applause for all this civic engagement. My name is Elisa Aguilera. I'm the executive director of Vocal New York Action Fund. We are a grassroots community organizing group based in Brooklyn, and we're so excited. In 2013, we held a similar forum in this very room, and we're glad to be back in 2017 with all of you here today. And we did not do this alone, so I want to give a shout out to a couple of the groups that helped put this forum together. So Color of Change, Communities United for Police Reform Action Fund, Faith in New York Action, Make the Road Action, Make the Road, all right, National Action Network, and Moms Rising. So lots of really wonderful criminal justice reform groups, police accountability groups came together because we care about who our next Brooklyn DA is. We know that the criminal justice system needs reform. We want to see an end to mass incarceration. We want to see real police accountability. And the wonderful thing about the Brooklyn District Attorney is that we get to vote. So we're all going to go out to vote on September 12th, and we want to be informed voters, and we want to know about the candidates, where they stand on important issues here today. And so we're going to have some of our members that are going to ask questions that impact their lives, that impact their communities, and we're really excited. We got a lot of young people of color that are going to be asking questions for our candidates here today. And so, without further ado, I also want to acknowledge the family of Delron Small and the family of Akai Gurley that are here today. So we honor you, we lift you up. And thank you to St. Francis College and BRIC Media they're going to be filming this and broadcasting it live on their network tomorrow and putting it online. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Brian Vines from BRIC TV. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can you guys hear me? Is this great? Excellent. Okay, so thanks to Vocal New York for inviting me and the folks from BRIC to be here tonight. Just a little housekeeping, going to let you know that as stated, this program is going to air in its entirety 2 hours from 9 till 11 tomorrow. It's going to be on, write this down now, or Google is still free, but Optimum Channel 70, Spectrum 1992, and the folks at Verizon are going to do their best to run it on Channel 46. So again, thank you to Vocal New York. My name is Brian Vines. I'm the senior correspondent at BRIC Media, BRIC TV specifically, and I've had the pleasure of meeting all of you. Now that I'm looking at the faces, everyone has come and sat down and shared our forum over at BRIC TV, but tonight is your night, so a minimum of talking from me, lots of questions from you and answers from these guys. We will encourage a little crosstalk, we'll keep it civil, but we also have some timing in the front, so pay lots of respect to this young woman. She's going to keep you honest, and we're going to do our best to keep things on track. So again, thank you all for being here. Feel free to shift your phones into vibrate mode or do something cute with them so they don't interrupt our lovely candidates here, but let the people know that you're here. The hashtag is, of course, our BKDA. So let the folks know you're here and that you're actively engaged in civics. So to that end, I want to thank St. Francis again. Thank you for the air conditioning. And thank you to our candidates for being here. I'm going to introduce them to you now, and they're each going to have 2 minutes to make themselves known to you. I'm going to start with Mark Fleetner here. Thank you for joining us this evening. And Sworn is next to him, Nosy. Vincent Gentili, City Council members here, our acting DA Eric Gonzalez, and Ama Jamo. They're all here for you this evening. So let's start on this end. We can alternate, but Ms. Jamo, please give us your opening statement.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ama Jamo, and I'm running for Brooklyn District Attorney. I served at the District Attorney's Office for 21 years. During the course of my service at the Brooklyn DA's office, my most notable work was the work that I did on behalf of children, child victims. I created the first Crimes Against Children Bureau in New York State for children under the age of 11, focusing on the voiceless who are caught up in the criminal justice system as victims. We were able to figure out a way to navigate through the waters of the criminal justice system so the children of this county could get their justice. I left the district attorney's office in 2010. I left because there was a difference in values that I had within the sitting DA, Joe Hines, when it comes to the values that I think are paramount for prosecutors. In 2012, I received a phone call from a man who asked me, Amma, I need your help. And that was Ken Thompson. I was an architect of what his vision looks like and what it looks like. As district attorney, I have 3 issues I'm going to focus on primarily. One is rebuilding the trust between the community and the law enforcement, dealing with the wrongful convictions. Right now, no one has been held accountable for the men who have been wrongfully convicted by the district attorney's office, and that's a problem. That goes to trust. Number 2 is about proactive justice. Proactive justice means focusing on prevention before people get caught up in the criminal justice system. And number 3 will be continuing to advocate on behalf of the vulnerable. That is our immigrants, it's our youth, it's our children, and our seniors. The bottom line is that we need to start focusing and having our finger on the pulse of what it is and what's going on in Brooklyn. People are saying crime is down, but not in the communities that I go to. It's just the opposite. And people don't feel like they're getting justice. And that's why justice matters to me. Thank you.
All right. So let's go to the other side. Mark, I'm looking at you. Mr. Fleetner,
Great,
you want to give us your opening?
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Fleeter. That's with a C and an F. I'm going to talk to you about 2 important things in the extraordinarily short time that I have. The first of them is this. You cannot vote acting District Attorney Eric Gonzalez into office. In the short time that he's been in charge of that office, he has committed more acts evidencing a disregard for the rule of law, a lack of respect for victims, and out-and-out acts of corruption than one could imagine somebody could do in a 4-year term. Case in point, the piece of paper that I put out for a lot of you. There is an extraordinary case going on right now where 2 lawyers have begged Eric Gonzalez to charge a man that they have evidence will show beat brutally a young black gay man along with another group of gang members. And Eric Gonzalez has ignored it because he is political cronies, chums with the brother of the individual who would be charged if he did his job. That is corruption. This is the evidence of corruption. Now, I'm going to ask you to give me an opportunity to tell you about me.
He's got 1 more minute, guys.
Thank you.
We know we're in Brooklyn.
Thank you.
We see you.
I am somebody who has the policy background and probably tried more cases of all kinds than anybody, including, I'm very proud to say, the Akai Gurley case. The thing that you need to know most about me, though, is that I am somebody who will bring to it not just knowledge, but fear and conviction and strength and the ability to fight for you, to fight for those you love, because I stepped away from that office when I saw that the office was not operating under Mr. Gonzalez's leadership in a way that took care of you all and met the responsibility of trying to achieve true and at last equal justice in this country, in this borough. We can be the leaders. Thank you.
All right, we are going to keep it moving, and we know, come on, we know where we're at. We're in Brooklyn, but booing, really? Like, come on, let's raise the discourse level just a little bit. We're in here, it's good. Mr. Gonzalez. Okay. They only have 2 minutes. Come on.
Good evening, everyone. Listen, I want to thank all the sponsors for organizing today's important DA forum. And listen, I'm happy to be addressing this group and all of the organizations that have partake in putting this together, because these organizations are led by and represent the people that are most impacted by our criminal justice system. And all of your organizations have done important and tremendous work in ensuring criminal justice reform and racial and social justice reforms. And I stand with all of you to say that I believe that we can end mass incarceration while continuing to keep our city and our boroughs safe. You know, in 2014, Ken Thompson chose me to help him run that DA's office. And I stand with all organizations who want to see the continuation of the policies that started in Brooklyn and the expansion of those policies. Because I believe that we can send less people to prison than we're currently doing and make sure that Brooklyn continues to be safe. You know, I grew up in this borough. I'm raising my family here. I have 3 young boys. And I'm committed to public safety, but I'm committed to fairness as well. And I also know that we can reduce our reliance on cash bail. We can continue to root out wrongful convictions and make sure that they don't happen again in the future. And that's work that I started with Ken, and I'm continuing. I also know that we can treat health and drug addiction as health issues, not criminal justice issues. And we can protect immigrants in our system and make sure that we all live in a more fair criminal justice system. And having grown up here in Brooklyn in the 80s and 90s, I know we can't go back to the bad old days of shootings and crime. We know that Brooklyn is safer, and most of the public safety initiatives that we've started, and I'm continuing, means that all of you and your families can live in a more safe place, but a more fair place. Thank you for having me tonight, and I look forward to answering your questions.
The floor is yours, Ann Sworn.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I see many people in the audience that I've worked with over the years, and it's such a pleasure to be among you tonight. I want to say that I'm running for district attorney because I love Brooklyn, and because I think Brooklyn deserves the best of everything. It has the best in you in terms of advocacy, in terms of caring about communities, different constituencies. I'm a mom too, so of course the group of moms bear special weight in my heart. I'm the only mom in the race. I want to say that the district attorney wields the most power and has the most discretion of any of the actors in the criminal justice system. And I demand that you demand and hold me accountable when I'm the district attorney about how I exercise that discretion. That discretion impacts on every single issue that we care about, that we read about, that we love in criminal justice and making reform happen. When you think about mass incarceration, when you think about the disproportionate contact among minorities with the criminal justice system, there is no one in the system who wields more power than the DA. And I have many, many ideas about how to exercise that discretion. One that sets me apart from this group, and there are a lot of things that set me apart from this group, is that I would have a statistician in my office. So every policy, everything I do is subject to the scrutiny of how it impacts individuals in every case, in every courtroom, with every victim and every defendant. Because the only way we're going to reduce mass incarceration, the only way that we're going to reduce and eliminate the disproportionate impact on the minority community is by paying attention to the details. And we could talk the talk or we could walk the walk. I submit to you that I walk the walk.
All right, we're going to move on to Councilmember Gentili, but before we do, I want to just remind you guys that this is Brooklyn, this is New York, and as such, we are translating right now. So if you could please do our translator a little favor and pace it. They are giving considerate, thoughtful answers. So when I ask them to just go a little slower, trust me,
that adds another minute.
And they know what they're talking about. They're just helping out our translator, who's doing a fantastic job. So thank you.
Good job, Dan. Good job. Well, thank you all for being here. You know, the DA has 2 roles. A part legal. The DA is part of the legal system, and the DA is also part of the political system. My background shows that I have experience in both. As you know, I've been an elected official for the last 20 years, both as a council member and as a New York State Senator from Brooklyn. So I know the stakeholders. I know the stakeholders on the city level, on the state level. I know how to change the law. I know how to negotiate budgets. That's what Brooklyn needs. They need more resources, a bigger budget. We need to change the law in Albany. I have worked with those colleagues in Albany. I am the only one who has that kind of experience. I'm also the only independent person from the Brooklyn DA's office among all the candidates here, including the acting DA, because my experience was for 11 years, even though I'm a lifelong Brooklynite, my experience was for 11 years in the Queens District Attorney's Office. So just like Ken Thompson, who came into Brooklyn DA as a independent and without fear or favor uncovered 21 wrongful convictions, And that's the worst thing you can say about a DA's office. The DA's office is convicting innocent people and putting them in jail. That's the worst thing you can say. Brooklyn has not 1, 2, or 3. They had 23 to date. And Ken Thompson came in without fear or favor and as an independent came in and uncovered it. I'm the only one here that did not come through the Brooklyn DA's office, that was not part of the management of the DA's office when those wrongful convictions were happening. So I am the best person, if you're looking for someone independent, to pick up the mantle from Ken Thompson and continue to uncover those wrongful convictions and change the culture of the Brooklyn DA's office and change the professionalism and ethics at the Brooklyn DA's office. We have an opioid crisis in this borough and in this city. We talk about the homicide rate going down. It's safer. Well, it's not safer for all those people who are dying on overdosing and opioids, and that's more than homicides and car collisions put together. The Brooklyn DA's office has not addressed that. It's time we look at those figures.
All right, so we are going to have some questions that have been curated from members of the community. But before we get to that, just as a little round robin, I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes should you decide to fully take it. But just as a scene setter, we know that Jabbar Washington was released from prison on July 12th. He came out a 43-year-old man. He went in a 20-year-old person. He was wrongfully convicted, we later found. And on the theme of that, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams has recently called for an independent state commission to investigate and determine all parties responsible for wrongful convictions within the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. And he's laid out a 5-point plan for Governor Cuomo. So I'm going to start with you, Ms. Jamo, and ask you, is that something that you would support and stand next to Borough President Adams in calling for this independent commission?
Without a doubt. First and foremost, a part of my platform is about creating an independent commission that would review the conduct of those actors who were involved in these wrongfully convicted cases. To date, out of the 23 cases where people have been wrongfully convicted, no one has been held accountable. So I'm sorry, you've got people who've been in jail for 27 years, 28 years. Wonderfully that they're exonerated and then they're out and they will get monies from the city. But the bottom line is, what is going on? What is happening? And the most important thing is that we must hold the system accountable. It is essential that the community knows that they can trust the system and that the people in the system will be held accountable. So I believe very strongly about the creation of an independent commission to review the work, review the conduct, because it's not just in the wrongfully convicted cases that I'm concerned about. Just in October, there was an assistant district attorney who was forging the signatures of a judge in order to move forward in an eavesdropping warrant and to eavesdrop against her boyfriend. That's a problem. That happened in-house, not outside, but that was a member of the district attorney's office. So I am wondering, what is going on in the DA's office? Clearly, oversight is needed.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, right now, do you think it's necessary for an independent state commission to come and investigate people who are your active colleagues at this moment?
Well, let's be clear what the call for, because I spoke to Borough President Eric Adams before the press conference. I also spoke to Justice Jonathan Lippman. The independent commission is looking at wrongful convictions, at the problem of wrongful convictions. They're calling for a statewide conviction. They're not looking to investigate the Brooklyn DA's office.
Do you think they should be?
Well, let me just say this, Brian. We began that work in 2014. Ken Thompson asked me to put together the conviction review unit, and we selected and we financed a very dedicated unit. Chief Judge Lippman and many other criminal justice experts cited the work that the Brooklyn DA's office did in exposing these wrongful convictions. We've looked at 23 cases where we found wrongful convictions. It should be noted that none of those prosecutors on those cases are in the office. It should also be noted that this work was some work that was very brave work that Ken Thompson started, that I've continued, and it's because of the work that we had that we've exposed this problem. And so we and I will be very committed to working with any independent commission. we believe that we have to expose wrongful convictions. In 2015, we put together a forum about wrongful convictions where DAs from around the country came, because we want to translate not just what happened in those cases, but we want to learn from them. So we've been continuing to train our ADAs on what the root causes of these wrongful convictions are. And in some cases, there have been instances where assistant DAs have failed to turn over discovery and Brady material, but in a lot of them there have been other errors. And these have been systematic errors, and that's what the commission is calling for, and I do support it.
So just 1 minute, I'm sorry, just to be clear, not in your office, not now, that you don't think this is applicable for the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office as it stands right now?
Well, I like to say this. The 23 cases, many of these cases, as everyone knows, have been 20 and 30 years people have spent in prison. And I've been committed to personally working on a lot of these cases. Any assistant DA who's found to do something intentional will be fired by me, and we will continue. We put together a ethics officer who looks to examine these cases, and when appropriate, we'll refer them to the grievance committee. There's no question that we're not going to stand by assistant DAs who intentionally do wrongdoing.
I'm going to go to Mr. Gentile, an independent state commission for the office you hope to hold.
Absolutely, absolutely. I double endorse what Eric Adams has called for, because it really, if you think about it, the Brooklyn DA's office, among any DA's office in the state, leads the state in wrongful convictions. And as I said, that's the worst thing you can say about a DA's office, that they're putting innocent people in prison. And frankly, this all happened under the tutelage of Charles Hines, the DA before Ken Thompson. And Eric Gonzalez is a creation of Charles Hines. He spent most of his years as a prosecutor under Charles Hines and only 3 years under Ken Thompson. So the question I've always asked and never get answered is what policies and procedures were in place during those years that allowed these wrongful convictions to occur. Never have gotten the answer to that. And the point, and I think I know why I'm not getting the answer to that, because it was part of that culture under the Hines management that Eric Gonzalez was a manager. He was a manager in that administration. And that is something that we have to be careful about if we're going to give the DA's office back to someone who was in management under the Hines administration. And you know what? They shield themselves by saying that the detective, in the case, in most cases, Detective Scarcella, did not do any wrong. It was a wrongful conviction, but the DA's office saying that Detective Scarcella did not do anything wrong, even though the judges, many of the judges have said that he acted improperly. Now, by the DA's office saying that Detective Scarcella did nothing wrong, they shield themselves from the next question, that if they said Detective Scarcella did something wrong, then what was it that the DA's office did to be complicit with Detective Scarcella?
All right,
so by making that distinction that he did nothing wrong, the DA's office is shielding himself from those types of questions.
So let me say this, because this is an important part. I've done more work on wrongful convictions than all the other candidates put together. I've been looking. I made the recommendation on all 23 of these vacated cases, so I stand by the work that I've done. We put together a national model. It's a national model. We have an independent review panel of outside lawyers that look at these cases. And we've been transparent. In every single case, you could ask any defense attorney who's worked on these cases. We provide all the discovery. On these cases, when we've done wrong, we've outed the assistant DAs who did not turn over the discovery. So there's been no hiding of evidence. In fact, the reason we're having this conversation is because the Brooklyn DA's office led the charge, and other DAs in other counties across this state and across this country need to have the same commitment that I have to rooting out wrongful corruption. And to say that I've been part of the management system for 20 and 30 years ago is ridiculous. Ken Thompson chose me in 2014 to help him lead the office. There's not a single wrongful conviction, Mr. Gentile, that you can say is associated with me.
What
First of
policies?
all, wait a minute.
What
Let's hold up here.
What
Let's
policies
hold up.
and procedures
That's half
were in
of the
place
vision of
that
Ken
allowed this to
Thompson.
happen? What policies and procedures were in place during the Hines years that allowed these wrongful convictions to occur? You never answer that question. You never answer.
We've answered it in every case that we've vacated. We talk about the systemic problems that we've had, not only with the DA's office, with the police department, with the court system, and with defense attorneys. In every single case, we lay out what went wrong in that case.
Where's that laid out? Where's that? Because it's not transparent. People don't know what you're
Daily
talking
News
about.
this morning to find out
That's an
about
issue.
the systemic problem that was created when your assistant district attorneys failed to listen to the defense attorneys who said, there's exculpatory evidence I need. My young client of color has been in on $25,000 bail month after month. Get me the 911 tape. And he sat there, and he sat there. And then finally, apparently it was provided, and the judge dismissed the indictment. Is that the systemic change that you're talking about making? Because if that had not been forced by the Daily News, by the defense attorney, would that man not be sitting for 10, 15, 20 years in jail? Dear God, are you kidding me?
All right, listen.
Okay, we're gonna pause right now. And these are all issues that we will certainly get into, and I would love to hear them through your lenses. So let's move along with just answering these two questions from our last two candidates. So the question, to be clear, was an independent state commission as called for by the borough president. Is that something you would be in support of for the office you would like to hold?
Yes, I would. And I think it's really important that it happens in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is a laboratory for change. It's been a laboratory for change, and it's a place where we can open up our office and be transparent and let people in to see what the system holds and what the failures are in the system. Because it's very important to hold the individual actors, the procedures, and the systems in place to let us know how to prevent them in the future. I have many, many ideas about how to prevent wrongful convictions in the future. But obviously, making good on the past is not enough. It's not enough just to say to a person who's been in prison for 20 years, here's your life back. It's not enough to give them the key to a private lawyer who gets him money. She never gets those years back. Never gets those years back. So it has to be that you hold people accountable. Holding lawyers accountable, of course, to have their law license taken away. That's the grievance committee. Holding them accountable by firing them, that's what the DA's office could do. So of course we should do that. But there's more. There are systems in place. There are paralegals. There are investigators that participate in this. They should be held accountable too. And it should be transparent so every person in this audience and every person who reads everything that you write knows what's going on in that district attorney's office. And I promise you that that will happen. And the partners in that, there's a very important partner in that we don't mention very much, and that's the defense attorneys. The defense attorneys are the people who brought to the attention the case that Mark's just talking about. It wasn't the DA's office themselves. It was the defense attorney who said, my client's innocent. Give me that 911 tape. Month after month after month, that 911 tape didn't come. And you know what the tragedy of that was? It's a double tragedy. Not only did it take 5 months to get that 911 tape, equally as important, while they were investigating the innocence of a man, he stayed in Rikers Island. If we're ever going to close Rikers Island, you cannot keep a person in Rikers Island for 5 months while you're investigating his innocence.
So I'm going to ask, just to keep things moving, Marquise from Make the Road, can you make your way to the microphone while Mr. Fleedner, let's keep our attention over here. Mr. Fleedner,
Sure.
the same question.
All right. Marquise, you got a fan club, but you got to let me answer my question first before you take the yes? You want to
Yes,
answer
please.
first? The conviction review unit that is being referred to here was created by a very distinguished African-American Harvard professor whose name was Ronald Sullivan.
That's right.
That's who Ken Thompson brought in to create the conviction review unit, not Eric Gonzalez.
Exactly.
And when Mr. Sullivan left, things have taken a very disturbing turn. It took a very intrepid, very talented investigative reporter, who happens to be in the room tonight, to investigate what's actually going on in the DA's office, including the fact that the individual who runs the conviction review unit, the man Mark Hale you see on the news every time that they let somebody free, was somebody that was right in the middle of all the homicide stuff and should have recused himself from a lot of the cases that he was handled, including one in which Mr. Gonzalez tried to wrongly accuse me of doing something wrong because I was a political ally. But what's so fascinating about that is that Mr. Hale, who lives in New Jersey, by the way, against state law, is somebody that shouldn't even be there. The structure of the place is ridiculous. There are 100-some Louis Scarcella cases that have not been completed, being investigated yet. This has been going on for years.
That's not true,
Are
by
you
the way.
kidding me? How many are left?
Just so you know,
Are
that's
there
not
Louis
true.
Scarcella cases that are left?
I think there's about 30 to 33 cases that are involving Scarcella. Was started with over 100.
How
So
could that be going on all these years later while people are sitting in jail waiting for their answer?
listen, Mark, your beef is not anything to do with what happened. You were the lead attorney on the case that was a wrongful conviction. You don't argue it's a wrongful conviction. Material had not been, Brady material was not turned over on your
absolutely
case. Right, and so you're the lead attorney, you handled the case pre-indictment, you failed to turn over the material, it's a wrongful conviction. Don't try to deflect.
This is a 2005.
Read the Daily Beast article. Read
This
the
is
Daily
why
Beast article, ladies and gentlemen, and find out what's really going on.
So to be clear, we're referring
This is why an
to a
independent
2000
commission is critical.
Gotta
We
get out
must
of there.
take this to the next
it out of
step.
there.
We have to, because it's not getting done, and it matters.
So just for expediency's sake, I think you're both referring to a 2005 double murder case that was a point of contention. So you guys can make note of that and look it up at your leisure. But right now we're going to go to Marquise from Make the Road. Share your question, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, this is not on.
I think it's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marquise Gonzalez. I'm from Make the Road, New York, as well as the Urban Youth Collaborative. So, since I was in high school, I have had unnecessary interactions with police because of normal, youthful behavior of black and brown youth is criminalized. What I want to know, will you decline to prosecute, sorry, I got really nervous.
No, right into the mic. Speak right into the mic.
All right, will you decline to prosecute misdemeanor cases from schools, and will you consent to removal of some additional violent felonies to family court for youth under the age of 18?
So repeat the last part, the crux of your question for me, Marquise.
Will you consent to remove some additional violent felonies to family court for youth under the age of 18?
Okay, you want to start, Mr. Fleedner?
Yes, Marquise. First of all, I was very happy about there was recently a law that was changed so that 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds are for the most part going to be handled in juvenile court. I was a fan of a bill that was went much further with that. 17 and 18-year-olds should be nowhere near Rikers Island. Should be nowhere near the criminal courts. It's an outrage. And also, I want to touch on the fact that what you were talking about is police activity sort of in the schools, right? And is that what you were subjected to?
Everybody knows police activity is in the schools.
Yeah.
Our young people of color are getting picked on by police in the schools.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for us
Well,
because we can get our education.
Many people in this room know that one of the foundation of my platform is that I demand that police be held accountable for wrongdoing, particularly against young men and particularly against young men of color. And that is one of the things that was the greatest concern for me when I left the DA's office, is that there has been an absolute dropping of the absolute responsibility to hold police accountable since I left as the chief of civil rights, since I was running a police misconduct unit back well over a year ago. And because that impacts on young people like you every day, I've watched countless videos. It's something that's got to be addressed immediately.
Okay, I just want to remind you each that there are 1 minute. I see the questions flowing in on your cards. Please continue to fill those out. Let's get through these answers as quickly as we can so we can do as many as we can. And Swern, the question was about removing violent felonies, yes?
Yeah, to family court
To
for
family
youth
courts.
under 18.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Marquise. I am so glad you're talking about adolescent justice because it's much bigger than the question that you asked. The brain does not fully develop till it's 25 years old. That means for every case. That means in every situation. The brain isn't one way in one case and one way in another case. So when we're talking about adolescents, we really need to be honest about what we're talking about. So of course, to remove it. And by the way, the legislation didn't go far enough, because the legislation took a small number of cases and sent them to family court, which may or may not do a great job with those cases. The jury's still out on that. As district attorney, I'm committed to watching that legislation, seeing how it wends its way through family court, and definitely sending the appropriate cases for the violent felonies to family court if family court will do a better job. I'm not 100% sure that family court has the resources or the programming to do a better job.
Mr. Gentile.
Well, the raise the age law that was passed this year is really it hasn't been, we haven't seen the effects of it yet, but it was so convoluted the way it was written and passed that I'm almost sure we're going to have to revisit this legislation. And by revisiting it, we can open up the question of including violent felonies for those less than 18 years old to go to family court. So I would be part of that conversation and that discussion. But let me also tell you that at the city council level, we have already done things to create a atmosphere of a civil, not a criminal penalty when it comes to low-level crime that many teenagers find themselves in, whether an open container, in the park at night, jumping a turnstile, those types of offenses. The city council last year, and I was a co-sponsor of this, voted to change the law to make those criminal summonses civil penalties so that youngsters have a penalty to pay, but they do not have a criminal record on their around their neck for years to come.
Okay.
That's a good step, and you'll see the effects of it this coming year.
All right, Mr. Gonzalez.
So we have to stop the school to prison pipeline, and we have to make sure that young people are treated with and given options to succeed and not to just punish them. So in Brooklyn, I could not wait for the raise the age legislation to pass. I created a young adult court that goes 16 to 24 to give young people a different way of handling their cases, because for over 20 years, the criminal justice system had young people come in, plead guilty to something, and then receive some sort of punishment, whether it be probation or community service or jail. Young adult court is about giving people therapeutic services, and at the end of it, trying to get their cases dismissed so the collateral consequences of convictions don't last for the rest of their lives. Growing up in this community, I saw many young people make mistakes at a young age and have those convictions haunt them for the rest of their lives in terms of education, housing, and employment. And I'm continuing to do that work to drive these cases out the criminal justice system and make sure that we treat young people with fairness.
Let's be honest, that court started in 2012. It wasn't started in 2014.
It started very clearly, and APY2 only dealt with 16 and 17-year-olds. I created a young adult court that goes 16 to 24. In addition to that, I also had Project Reset start, where we started to divert young people right from the precinct, not even take them to court in the first place, and give them options so they would not get fingerprinted and develop criminal records.
That was started also, wait a second, that was also started with the Racial Justice Task Force that the ABA gave us $25,000 to do, and it was only Ray Kelly that didn't allow us to do it earlier in the process. So let's be honest.
So it implemented with us, not when you led the office. When you led the office with Charles Hines, you didn't get it done.
And you worked for Charles Hines too, and you were the head of the Green Zone, closer to the cases than I ever was.
And then you sat quietly when they talked about wrongful convictions. When you sat about wrongful convictions, you were the first assistant DA. You were the first assistant DA.
Ask me about the cases I was involved in. Ask about Scat Fabiano. Ask about all the cases. Ask Barry Scheck how many cases I worked with him when DNA was starting.
So, just as a reminder, are you abreast of the question, Ms. Jameau, or should we repeat it? Okay.
Could you repeat the question? That would be fine. Thank you. Thank you. Do you mind? Thank you.
Consent to.
You know, I think I have it. So
Consent to
getting young people into
family court, sending more cases to family court. And first of all, I think a lot of, you're talking about you said violent cases.
To remove some of the additional violent felonies to family court for youth under age.
Yes.
Under the age of 18.
Yes, I will. I don't have a problem with that.
How so?
How so? Well, there's a process in which you have those cases removed to family court. And so I would go through that process. Bottom line is that I do firmly believe that the family court is better suited to handle a lot of the cases that are impacting our youth. That's why I always believed in specialization when I was head of crimes against children. I believe that you have to have people be in forums where their issues and their needs are readily addressed and seen. So that to me becomes really important. Another thing, I think you asked a second question, right? You asked about the low-level crimes? You did, right? Yeah. Yes, you did. Okay. Okay.
So we're just slapping.
Come on.
I'm sorry, but my daughter was a victim of a brutal assault years ago, and that's a violent crime to me.
Right.
You know what? We can address these things, but let's keep it on track. No, there's no need to be sorry. You're here to have your voice heard, and I want to make sure everyone does in the most equitable way. So, just to finish out that question, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay, and that's dealing with low-level crimes. Bottom line is, our black and brown youth and Latino youth throughout Brooklyn are impacted more so than any other population in Brooklyn when it comes to low-level crimes. What has been deemed quality of life issues actually turns out down the road into criminal convictions for our youth, and that's a problem. And that's something that we're going to have to stop, and I will stop. I mean, the bottom line is this. I'm just going to keep it very simple. The goal of justice has to be able to address the needs of the people and ensure that our young people, our tomorrow, have an opportunity to achieve the goals that they set out to achieve. And that's why proactive justice matters to me, because a lot of people get caught up. They may have drug issues.
I think we got you. We're going to have
Okay,
to move on
thank you.
to
No
Valdez
problem.
from the Close Rikers campaign. You want to make your way over, Valdez? We'll keep it moving. Yeah, come on. And Devontae, you want to get in line as well so we can move it along? But this is Valdez from Close Rikers campaign. Right into the mic.
Yes, that's correct, but I'm standing in for Valdez.
Please.
So I am actually a former defense attorney, and so I very much witnessed how much of a very real and negative effect that our criminal justice system, and particularly Rikers Island, has on not just our young people, but on the millions of, or hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers that are constantly funneled in and out of our criminal justice system. So now that New York City has officially taken a stance in favor of closing Rikers Island, I would like to know first, what policies you would implement to ensure that we, in fact, can close Rikers Island immediately, as soon as possible. And then two, more importantly, considering 75% of people currently in Rikers Island are there because they cannot afford bail, when you address what policies you would like to implement, I'd like to specifically know what policies around bail you plan to implement to ensure that we can close Rikers Island immediately.
I think it's appropriate that we start with a city council member. You want to start that question off for us? 1 minute?
Sure. 1 minute? Okay. 1 minute. Okay. Well, just looking at the case of Khalif Browder tells you that Rikers is not working. We've got to do something. If someone like Khalif Browder, who was there for 3 years and not convicted of anything, was waiting for 3 years and was for a backpack, for allegedly stealing a backpack. We understand that we cannot continue that. And I was the only candidate that was there at the unveiling of Judge Lipman's report. So I have endorsed that report, and certainly when it comes to bail reform, I want one aspect of bail reform. I know my time's up. One aspect of bail reform I would support and try to change the law on would be to require the judges to have the financial status of a defendant available to them before any bail was set. And that is something that is not in the law now, but I will work to make sure that's in the law.
And Swern.
I will say this, that I was managing counsel at Brooklyn Defenders, and I have a lot of friends at the Legal Aid Society, and they represent most of the people in Brooklyn. And I hear to this day that they get together and that frequently a plea offer is offered in criminal court for a non-jail sentence. And when the defendant doesn't take that, bail is requested. We will never close Rikers Island if we continue to do that. And so I think that we should really honestly examine those bail policies. When someone's a homeless person, $500 is asked for bail for a homeless person who steals cheese, and the assistant district attorney responds to the defense attorney, well, it was expensive cheese, we will never close Rikers Island. So we really, really need to look at our bail policies. But there are 4 places that we can impact on closing Rikers Island. It's charging honestly, not overcharging, because the charges set the stage for bail. Second is with a bail request. The most important person in the courtroom requesting bail is the DA, and the judge almost always sets what the DA requests. The third place that nobody's talking about is discovery reform. You were a defense attorney. You know that discovery reform is really important. Defense attorney has an honest conversation with his or her client so that the client can make a decision. Do I take this plea? Do I fight this case? And fourth is all the alternative sentencing that I set up, the drug treatment, the mental health treatment, all of those courts that I set up way back when, and using them to their fullest capacity, not hiding behind a judge who takes a plea over the DA's objection.
Mr. Fleetner.
I hear you, and I'm backing up further. There are a litany of what I guess are referred to these days as broken windows offenses, many of which I believe to be survival offenses for those that face poverty and homelessness. I won't be charging them. I won't be putting them through the system. If I don't put them through the system and I tell the police commissioner to stop arresting and putting people in cuffs for that, they're not going to go through the system. There's no chance they're going to go to Rikers. That's step one. Absolutely realistic charging, not overcharging, which is still a systemic problem. And if I have a situation, and I'm going to have experienced people and social services people at the earliest stages of evaluating a case before a bail argument is made in criminal court, and if they find that this is a case that is not a jail case, no jail, no bail recommendation. ROR. If they need assistance with mental health or something, we'll facilitate that, but no bail on cases where we're not seeking jail. And if you think that the system is working in this way now, you need to understand that, it was in a recent town hall forum about broken windows that Mr. Gonzalez read a manuscript, a transcript from when one of his ADAs asked for $1,000 bail on a turnstile case. For real?
Okay, we're going to go to Ms. Jamal.
I'm going to send home all misdemeanor defendants awaiting trial under an expanded pre-trial supervision program, okay? I want to look at these low-level cases, and where needed, I will dismiss or divert the cases. Now remember, pre-trial detention does not reduce recidivism. It's actually unfair to the person who just doesn't have money. See, what we're doing is we're criminalizing being poor, and that is unacceptable. You have to look at the first part of the system, the Early Case Assessment Bureau. And in the Early Case Assessment Bureau, you need to have seasoned prosecutors who understand and who can review these cases coming in, because that's what starts this whole pipeline into the mass incarceration. Because in truth, that in that first spot, that's where they put the junior brand new lawyers. That's a problem. They don't know, they don't have the experience. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Mr. Gonzalez.
So this isn't a political consideration for me, because this is a life experience. I grew up poor, and I understand that when we set bail on people who can't make bail, we've in essence criminalized the fact that they live in poverty.
Why are you still doing it?
Okay, so let me say this. I've been the district attorney now for about 9 months after Ken Thompson passed, and looking on this with the other candidates who had positions of authority in this office, I'm the first person who's changed the bail policy. The intent of my new bail policy, which is public and which has been working, is to reduce the number of people held on bail. Is it always going to be perfect? I promise you it's not going to be, but my intent is to make sure that it's fair and that it protects the people of Brooklyn. We're only going to ask for bail when necessary. And I ask you, and I charge everyone in here to look it up independently. Brooklyn asks for the least amount of bail of any other county, and it's set at the lowest number in Brooklyn.
And that has been for several years. Look, Brooklyn has historically, if you look at those statistics, I invite you to do that. Brooklyn has historically set lower bail than other counties like Manhattan, and the defense bar knows that. But to close Rikers Island, you have to go further.
Devontae from Faith in New York.
My name is Devontae. Can everyone hear me?
Get real close over there. Yeah, hold it. It's fine.
My name is Can y'all hear me now? All right. My name is Devontae T, and I'm here on behalf of Faith in New York and Live Free. All right. So just to get some context around my question before I get to it, I grew up in the East New York part of Brooklyn my whole life. Still lived there, born and raised, right? And as you know, as of late, there's been a lot of gang indictments going around. And this is something that's very close to myself because I was a part of a gang that was indicted on August 28th, 2012. Now, 58-person count indictment. And I can remember the day like it was yesterday. My father on the porch, cops coming with these big boulders ready to knock down the door. I mean, we talking 30 cops, right? Like just to come get my brother. And it's just ridiculous the way to see things happen, you know. Because within these gangs, you have the people who quote unquote did something, the people who you think did something, and then the people who you just have proof of being in a gang, so you just throw them in Rikers Island. And there was people sitting in their jail cells not even knowing what they were charged with. So pretty much, it's not working. And
What's your question, Devontae?
oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm going to get to the question right now.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I want to know, what are you going to do about the situation of gang indictment? Because it's still happening to this day right now. And also, we recently got letters in the mail. I'm going to say it to the audience too. We recently got letters in the mail, right? Saying that if something was to happen again, they would indict the whole gang all over again. What? The whole gang all over. We talking about people who haven't done nothing in years. Indict the whole gang all over again. So that's my biggest concern right now. What are we going to do? What are you going to do to address this problem? Because it's not working.
Name the problem. What problem specifically?
The problem is gang indictments taking young black boys off the streets, young women off the streets, and throwing them in prison for no reason.
Gotcha.
You all know once you're labeled a gang member, it's easier to be convicted. So what are we doing? Because we're not protecting our streets, we're just adding more flames to the fire.
Okay.
Ms. Jamil, you want to start that one for us?
First, yeah, exactly, that was my question. Who did you get the letter from?
The letter came from One Police Plaza.
So it came from the police department.
Yes.
And the letter in essence said that they're going to do a mass arrest.
Again, yes.
See, okay,
That's in partnership with the Brooklyn DA's office.
okay, all right, because because I am unfamiliar with this, what you're saying to me, and I'm very
And actually, a
surprised.
colleague next to you,
Yeah, and
one just happened in Brownsville.
Okay, and I will, because you see, he's the acting DA, and if something like this is happening, then we need to know, because this really is beyond troubling. All right?
Actually, there's a man at Brooklyn College, a professor at Brooklyn College, who's investigating this thoroughly. His name is Alex Vitale. I suggest that you talk to him. He's a professor at law, and he's a college professor, and he is examining exactly what you're talking about. And the problem of that is no individualized justice. That somebody might have made a mistake 5 years earlier and might have been involved in a gang, but that 5 years later, that person's getting a letter to rope him into a big conspiracy case where 150 people get arrested is not appropriate. Yes, we must hold violent people accountable. Yes, we must hold people who are hurting our people accountable. But that doesn't mean 150 people. That means the people who are actually shooting, the people who are actually hurting people. And that requires a DA that's discerning and that's careful and individually looks at the cases, and not cases from 5 years ago, but cases today and people's behavior today.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, with the knowledge of what Devontae shared about this letter, is this something that you're aware of and, in fact, willing to make invalid? Passions are flowing, but let's just slow it down a little.
So thank you for bringing up that issue. One of the things that happened, we look at historically, Brooklyn had 115, 116, 117, 118,000 arrests. Last year in 2016, it was down to under 87,000 arrests. One of the ways that we've transformed the DA's office since 2014 is by preventing mass arrests and sweeps. So just a few weeks ago, I did a gang takedown in Bushwick, and the police department had identified over 56 people that were part of this gang. And in the old days, under Joe Hines and actually Mark Fleetner was the head of the Narcotics Bureau, they would indict the entire gang and entire crew. We only indicted the people that were involved in the shootings, and we call that the drivers of crime. So the office has changed the policy of the way we deal with these cases, and I also believe that it's the fair and just way to handle these cases. We can't have mass arrests, and we don't charge widespread conspiracies, and you've seen that over the last few years. You don't see 50, 60 people indicted like you did in the old days. In fact, most of our indictments are only a handful of people.
So if the police were to round them up, you would decline to prosecute?
So there's a program that's called Ceasefire. That is the program you probably received a letter from. And what the police department is saying is if there's a shooting, and they only send that letter after a homicide or a shooting, that they're saying if there's retaliation, that the entire gang could be held accountable. But that's not, that's what the police department is warning of. The actual choice of who gets indicted and how many people get indicted falls on my shoulders.
All right, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Fleetner.
Is it accurate to state that the program, the Operation Ceasefire, is done by the NYPD in partnership with the DA's office, to answer the young man's question?
Yeah, it's done with many law enforcement agencies.
Is the King County District Attorney's Office one of them?
Yes, it is. I just said that.
Just to answer your question, so you got your
Right.
answer.
But the answer is that we decide who we indict, not the police department.
Well, that's right. And that's the most important thing. Getting back to something that Ann stated in the beginning, the power of the prosecutor is so profound and is so awesome. And I have, over the course of my career, had so many disagreements with police officers who wanted to charge countless people with conspiracy based, first of all, on improper identifications that violated their constitutional rights, evidence that was not sound, all different kinds of things. And the role of the prosecutor is to say no to that. The reason why everybody likes that is so that the prosecutor can stand up and have a big old sexy press conference where the prosecutor holds guns and holds phones and holds all the things that they seized. And the plain and simple fact is that has to stop. It will absolutely stop on my watch, because I value young men of color, and I've done it in everything that I've ever done in my 30-year career. But the point is, it has not stopped yet. Do not be fooled.
Mr. Gentili, the last answer is yours.
Devontae, when did you get that letter?
That was a few months ago, back in February.
A few months ago, okay. So as the DA just said to you, it is a letter that the district attorney knows about and is fully aware of. So, and the fact is that if there's indicating that they were going to, the police were going to indict everybody, police don't vote the indictments. It's the DA's office. So there is some complicity there with the DA's office in sending a letter like that. And when they do things like you describe, the police are the ones that have the gang mentality by coming in and rounding up hordes of people and labeling them as gang members. That is behavior that I will not stand for as the district attorney.
All right, can I thank you for your question, Devontae. We appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Egypt from Communities United for Police Reform's Action Fund. It's making our way up right now. And Corey from Vocal, you're going to be next, so gotcha.
Hi, my name is Victoria Davis. I'm the sister of Delron Smalls. He was murdered by NYPD officer Wayne Isaacs on July 4th, 2016 on Atlantic and Bradford. I'm here in Brooklyn. I'm here with Akai Gurley's aunt, my godmother, and my son. My question is, what will you do to ensure officers who killed New Yorkers face justice? Past Brooklyn DAs have horrible records when it comes to police killings, and their transparency with families whose Loved ones have been killed. For example, Charles Hines maintained a policy of never communicating with families. Under Kim Thompson, Akai Gurley's killer got off with no jail time, and Kimani Gray's mother had to learn her son's case was closed without a grand jury from the media.
So are we all clear on what the question is? You want to start, Ann?
Me?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, 1989, a black man was killed by a police officer on Eastern Parkway. I was the prosecutor of that case, and I took that case to trial, and that police officer did state prison time. So I, as an assistant district attorney, was doing it before Joe Hines was even elected as the DA. And I'm committed to holding police officers and everybody accountable who commits a crime and hurts people. I'm committed to having a bureau that is specifically investigates those cases, and most importantly, to your question, honestly talking to the people involved from the get-go so that there is no question in people's minds what's going on. And if it requires more transparency in the grand jury, if it definitely requires better communication with the district attorney's office, I am totally committed to doing that with all victims' families, especially and including victims' family where there's media attention and they have to learn things from the media and not from the district attorney herself.
Mark Fleedner, you won a conviction.
Yes. First of all, you might not know it because it was an emotional day, but I met you at the 4th of July weekend memorial, recognition that took place in the park. I was there. I'm very familiar with your situation. I'm also very familiar, obviously, with the Gurley family situation. Many of you in this room know, and you may know, that one of the reasons I left the office had to do with the way that the Akai Gurley case was handled. We did something remarkable for this country. We asked a grand jury and a trial jury to look at difficult evidence to a reckless killing and determine what the right outcome was. And they returned a verdict of manslaughter in the second degree and an indictment before that for manslaughter in the second degree. And then we turned around and chose to treat Peter Liang over my recommendation for something entirely different, that he be treated like anybody else that got convicted of that crime with a non-jail sentence. It was the wrong message. It was the wrong decision in many ways. The worst part was that the family was not allowed to be involved with the recommendation at all, and they found out about it on the news, despite the fact that I had the mother on the phone in Florida waiting for the call from the district attorney. It was an outrage. It offended me as a victim advocate and as somebody who feels that these police misconduct cases are of great concern when people's civil rights are violated, and it has got to stop. And the problem is, we were doing great work.
Okay, Mr. Gentili, prosecuting
and now
police.
What's going on? What is going on?
I agree with Mark that for the public to have confidence in the system, it has to be transparent. And it didn't happen. The communication with the families didn't happen with Akai Gurley, Romali Graham, Eric Garner. There was no communication by the DA's office with the families. In fact, in the Eric Garner case, I called for the release of the grand jury transcript as a way to increase that transparency. And there's a way to do that where you can take out the names of the witnesses in the grand jury so you keep their confidentiality. But I called for that because of what you're talking about, that there has to be transparency for people to have any confidence in the system, and communications with the family is the #1 priority of the district attorney, and it will be in my office too.
Let's go down the line. Mr. Gonzalez.
So every family who's a victim of a crime needs to know that their DA is going to care about their case. And that also includes people who've lost a family member due to officers. And so my commitment is to make sure that my office remains open, that I am willing to be transparent and meet with them and explain what's happening. We have to remember what was happening before Ken Thompson got elected, and we have to judge his decision in that case in the narrative that was appropriate. You had the police commissioner and many city officials saying that what happened to Akai Gurley was just a tragic accident. We put together a trial team. Mark was part of that trial team. Joe Alexis was the lead attorney, and Boardley was the appeals attorney, and I supervised that case directly. We held Peter Liang responsible for what he did. No, we did. We had him convicted. You could disagree. You could disagree with the sentence recommendation. You can disagree with the sentence recommendation, but the Brooklyn DA's office was the first DA's office that held a police officer accountable in a very long time in this city.
But before, and you will get your chance, I want to let Ms. Jamo respond to the
No problem.
question
Thank you
that
very
was
much. First of all, it is a moral outrage that the family was never involved. Families, victims must be involved with the prosecution in any case. Sometimes it's hard to have these conversations, because sometimes, and I've had to do that, especially as chief of crimes against children, when the evidence is there, but you have to weigh out so many other things. And I've sat down with families and had to explain to them why I was going to take certain steps in order to get their justice. So it is unconscionable that anyone, especially in a homicide case, that the family would not know and be working in partnership. Number two, when it comes to these shooting cases of officers, of unarmed people, first I'll note for the record that it is in predominantly black and brown neighborhoods. And that brings me great concern. And I'm not sure why no one is willing to just understand this. I was a prosecutor there, and what I did know is that when a shooting like that takes place and you walk into a precinct, things are different. So I firmly believe that in these cases, I am going to ask for a special prosecutor. Why? Because it is important. Now, you know the Attorney General, he has that authority. It hasn't been exercised, but he has that authority. The bottom line is, it's important because it's about rebuilding the trust. You see, just by the very nature of these questions, we know that there's been a betrayal of the trust in the community. In order to rebuild that, you need transparency, you need accountability, and you need to be able to know who's making those decisions, and that is critical.
So I'm going to give you the last minute before we jump over to Corey's question.
Hi, everyone. Can y'all hear me? My name is Hortensia Peterson, and I am the aunt of Akai Gurley.
Sorry for your loss. We love you. This is for Akai.
Akai was murdered. You know, everybody have this thing that Ken Thompson did this, Ken Thompson did that. I am here representing my sister Sylvia Palmer. There was no communication if we did not continue to badger his office. Whenever we called his office, he's in a meeting, he's out of town. We had so much hell to get through to that office. There's no transparency. You know that.
Could you get through to me, hon?
The only person, every time myself or my brother-in-law in Florida called that we got through and return calls was Mark Fleetner. You know that, and I know that. On top of that.
And he supervised that case?
No.
Gonzalez?
Every time we had a meeting, or the 2 times that we had a meeting, he was Ken Thompson's crony because he was following right behind him. You are standing here and you're saying, and I asked you, and when we was at the, y'all have to forgive me for getting a little hyper, because when I talk about my nephew's murder, I am not just talking about Akai Gurley's murder. I am talking about Ramarley Graham's murder. I am talking about Daron Small's murder. I am talking about Kamani Gray's murder. The Brooklyn DA's office failed each and every last one of us. How on God's earth can you say that because Peter Liang did not have a prior any disciplinary charges, therefore Ken Thompson wrote a letter of recommendation. Unknown to the family, everything was found out in the media. When my sister was leaving work, Mark Fleetner was on the phone with her. She heard it before he said it. I was on my way home going through Holland Tunnel.
Okay.
I heard it. I'm very upset that you're going to sit here and say, you did this, you did that. No. Collectively, what have you done since Ken Thompson's demise? Do not stand here or sit here and work on what his goals, his visions are. You're running for DA. What are your goals? What are your visions? Do not run on Ken Thompson's coattail. Run on your own vision. Give the people of Brooklyn what you want for your family.
Thank you for speaking for the people of Brooklyn.
Justice for Akai.
So, Ms. Peterson, what I could say to you is I'm committed to doing the work. You know, there's no words that can ever bring Akai back. That's not what this is about.
Why haven't you done it?
Done what exactly?
Done the work.
Okay, we're not going to do this. Let's not do this. Can we really just keep it here? I understand the passion, and I feel you. Thank you for sharing everything that you did, and we understand that passion is stirred, and this is what the election is about. We're going to listen, and we're going to vote. You guys have the power. Let's have some answers.
So what I'm prepared to do is to sit down with every family who suffered a loss like yours, and sit down, go through the case, and be with them. And you can't say that you ever called me and I didn't return your call. That's not what happened. You had a conversation. You worked with Mark. No, she's not saying that she called me. I'm just saying, she's not saying she ever called me. Let's be clear. She's upset because Ken Thompson recommended a no jail plea on Peter Liang. And when I was asked, when I was asked, Ms. Peterson, I'm going to answer.
Do you think if it was a kind girlie that have murdered Peter Liang? A life was taken. You guys are not understanding the pain it's on families. You understand?
Right.
You're not understanding. So don't try to pacify me.
Right. I'm not trying to pacify you. What I said publicly, and what I've said to you privately as well, is that Ken Thompson believed that he made the recommendation that he believed was appropriate. He discussed it, and I stood by his recommendation. He's not here. No, he's not here.
Okay.
Listen, he's not here.
We just in this forum, we're going to have to move past so we can get more questions and answers in with all respect to the family. And every person in the room who would like to know the answer, it's okay, I'm right here. So we're going to ask Corey from Vocal New York to take us to the next question.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
We got you.
All right, well, first off, I want to say, young folks, old folks of wisdom, I just want you to think critically because the answer, lies right in front of you. You hear the answers from the DAs. Sometimes some of the DAs can obfuscate some things, but let me just get into my story. My name is, my story then go and transition into the question. My name is Corey Bates. I'm a member of Vocal New York, and I live in Kensington Park in Brooklyn. I've been a resident of Brooklyn for 30 years. I am a father of an 11-year-old son, and I'm an advocate for a variety of social issues like relationships and homelessness. Recently, I received a phone call from an NYPD detective who said he wanted to interview me about a case. The detective said that my son's grandfather had been to the hospital and told police there that I had put my hands on him. The detective asked me to come to the precinct to share my side of the story. My son's grandfather and I had recently had a verbal disagreement that never got physical. I had no problem with talking to the detective because I wanted to clear my name and because it was a responsible thing to do. When I arrived at the precinct, there was no conversation. Instead, I was immediately handcuffed, arrested, put in a holding cell, had my fingerprints taken, and then driven to the central bookings. The next morning, I was brought into court where I met a public defender and I saw the district attorney and the judge. After a short presentation, the district attorney asked the judge to set bail at $3,000. My public defender asked for no bail because I had never missed a court before, and I'm an active member of the community. I do work with various community organizations that have people supporting me there in the courtroom. The judge eventually set $1,000 bail, an amount that I could not afford. In fact, a recent study showed that just 37% of Americans have between $500 and $1,000 available cash
Corey,
for emergencies.
Your question, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna get right into it.
Right to it now.
Okay, I'm gonna get into it. My heart dropped at the moment because I could not believe that they made up a story.
Corey,
that would
may
cause
we
so
please
much
have your
disruption in my
question?
life. I have to get this off. A Kyle Gurley,
Can we have your question,
I just
please?
want to let you know, Kyle Gurley was a personal friend of mine. Let me finish. Let me just finish. Luckily, the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund heard about my case and after interviewing me agreed to post bail on my behalf. The Brooklyn Community Bail Fund has posted bail for 2,000 people that district attorneys and judges thought would not return for their court dates. Nearly all of those people, like me, have returned to court every time they are asked to go. How, as district attorney, would you ensure that people like me are not forced to go to Rikers Island solely based on the fact that I do not have $500 or $1,000 to buy my way out? Someone who had money and was charged with the same exact case would have been able to pay their own bail and go home. And that's not right. Do you think the cash bail system is fair? Would you commit to not seeking bail amounts that people cannot afford? Question done.
Ahmad Jamal.
First of all, we need to eliminate this cash bail, okay? We can't criminalize. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When it comes to like murders, so we're talking about a different story, okay? But I'm talking about in situations like what you're describing, okay? Cash bail criminalizes being poor. That's what it does. And I think with you can have pre-trial supervision, okay? There are things that you can do that doesn't require bail, that will ensure that you'll come back to court, because that's what bail is for. Bail is to ensure that you're going to come back. So let's say it's a misdemeanor, right? And you now are in Rikers Island. You can't make that money. You could end up spending over a year in Rikers Island awaiting trial. Remember now, you're innocent until proven guilty. So now you're in Rikers Island waiting, but you don't have the money. That's a problem. And that's what we've got to stop. So that's my answer to your question.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Gentili.
Well, certainly, I think, first of all, it was outrageous, given the facts you told us, that the DA's office would even ask for bail on your case. They did absolutely no investigation as to the circumstances that you were in or your background or anything. So it is a fault of the DA's office that Assistant DA stood there in that courtroom and asked for bail on you. That's outrageous. And that is something that they have to take responsibility for. And certainly, as I said, I think the change in the law we have to have in Albany is that we require judges to have the financial status of a defendant in front of them, available to them, before any kind of bail is decided upon. And in most cases, then it should be an ROR or some time of pretrial supervision, as Amma has said. And by the way, just another point, the city council created the city bail fund that you used and was used to get you out. So that's something that we funded and continue to fund.
Ann Swearn.
Just let's be clear. if they asked for $2,500 bail, that community bail fund wouldn't have been able to make it because there's a statutory limitation. Our assembly did pass legislation recently that raised that amount to $5,000. And as district attorney, I would be supportive of that legislation. I'd be in Albany talking about how great that is. Because we do know, and Peter Goldberg is here, who runs the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund, and he knows that almost every single person has returned to court. Why are they returning to court? Because we give them a Metro card. Because we call them on the phone, we remind them of their court date. That's what assures a person's return, not overcharging them so that they can't make the bail. So it does penalize poverty. It definitely penalizes poverty. And we do have a small pretrial supervision program right now. Unfortunately, there are very limited cases that fall into the category where they can get pretrial supervision because it operates under the same premise, which is a Metro card, services that are voluntary to help a person remind themselves to go back to court, and just the simple reminder that you have a court date, and an advocate if, God forbid, you're in the hospital, God forbid you have to take care of your younger brother or sister because your parent has to go to work, that there's an advocate for you to say they're not going to be in court today, but they can be in court tomorrow. And that's what you need, and that's what Peter Goldberg does, that's what the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund does, and that's what all the great defense attorneys who represent people like you do.
Mr. Gonzalez, same question.
So I'm committed to trying to prevent exactly what happened to you from happening. And we've changed the bail policies in Brooklyn in April of this year. Many people here are going to tell you what they hope to do. I'm telling you what I've already done. I've been in conversations with Peter Goldberg and checking in with him to make sure that the policy that I implemented is working. I've sent supervisors over to the courtroom now to monitor to young assistant DAs are making better decisions, and we're monitoring. So we have supervisors in the courtroom to prevent what happened. And I'm also committed to expanding supervised release. I hope to put Peter out of business one day, that we are not asking for bail in the type of cases that Peter's organization needs to get involved in. And finally, I think that we need to modify how we ask for bail, because we need a change in the law, because right now the standard is really risk of return. We really should be looking at asking for bail only when public safety demands it and not just simply risk of return.
Thank you, Corey. So I'm just gonna, we are closing in on our last 20 minutes, so I'm gonna ask you this is a simple yes or no question. We can start with Ms. Jameau.
Can I just really briefly answer the same question? Because I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped you.
No, that's okay. I don't know if the opportunity.
No, it's your 1 minute.
All right, I just didn't have the opportunity because it's important that I say it. I've talked to Peter too. I love the bail fund. I think what they do is extraordinary. But I want to put them out of business because I advocate for elimination of cash bail. Will you please tell me, will anybody in this room please tell me where it is proven, statistically or otherwise, that having somebody cough up, find a way, if they can, to come up with $200 bail is going to ensure their appearance in court, which is the only legitimate basis for a bail. So that they do it. They did it for all intents and purposes in New Jersey, for God's sake. Why can we not eliminate cash bail? Yes, if it's a homicide. Yes, a remand, fine. But when we're talking about the kinds of offenses that this gentleman addressed, this is outrageous. His situation is exactly why the bail system has failed. That's where I come down.
I apologize for stealing your minute. So to make up for that, first, yes or no, should DAs be subjected to term limits?
That is a great question.
And it's a yes or no question.
My answer is yes. 2 terms.
Yes, because that's a great way to avoid a wrongful conviction.
Mark said 2 terms. Are you willing to commit to a number of
2 terms, absolutely.
I'd say yes, absolutely. There are too many DAs that have been around for too long.
You want to attach a term?
2 or 3.
2 or 3. Mr. Gonzalez.
I also support that.
You know what the second part of the question is. How many terms? 1, 2, 3?
2 or 3, 8 to 12 years seems like plenty of time to serve in any position. And we also have to make sure that we continue to have young blood into the system to innovate ideas.
Definitely 2 terms. We saw after Charles Hines being in office for over 20-something years, the issues that we are now paying for.
Okay, this is another short answer that we're going to start with you. Right now, gun possession cases in Brooklyn have mandatory prison sentences. Are you willing to support individualized justice and reject mandatory minimums as a categorical bar to non-jail sentences in gun cases? Yes or no?
I take gun cases very seriously. There's just too much gun violence out there. So I would support incarceration for gun cases.
So you would keep the status quo for the gun cases?
For gun cases, absolutely.
Mr. Gonzalez.
I believe in individualized decision making on every case. There are mandatory minimums on gun cases. However, in my office, we look at individual cases, and especially with young people, we have diverted people charged with gun possession outside of the criminal justice system. We have diversion programs. So while we work under mandatory minimums, I would support eliminating mandatory minimums on gun cases.
So mandatory minimums, yes or no, in your DA?
The assistant DAs in my office will be skilled enough to evaluate each case on its own merits. So mandatory minimums will not be necessary.
Individualized. And Swan.
I believe in individualized justice, and the problem with mandatory anything is that it takes away the discretion of the judge. So I do not believe there should be mandatory anything, and I think that individual cases should be treated individually, and I think judges should be able to have the discretion to make decisions individually.
Individualized, absolutely. My concern is going after the firearms traffickers that are driving them from Georgia up the I-95 corridor and dumping them into the hands and on the streets of our young people.
Okay, another quick yes or no. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Gonzalez. Will you commit your office to declining to prosecute all broken windows offenses, including park trespassing, subway jumps, and minor drug possessions? This is a yes or no.
All right, thank you. Listen, I've already indicated that I'm looking to divert drug cases as a health issue. I've also publicly stated that I would follow DA Vance's lead on the turnstile jumping. So we have to be very careful when we say all cases. I need to know what cases you're talking about. But I believe that the criminal justice system is way too big and too many cases come into it, and that we need to have the ability to remove those cases out of the criminal justice system. Okay. So I'm not going to say yes without knowing all the categories, but the categories you just stated, yes.
So just to be clear, under your working definition of broken windows violations, which would you not decline? Which would you in fact prosecute?
What?
Under your working definition of broken windows.
Well, for broken windows, if we were talking about real base broken windows, you're talking about all the low-level violation cases. I support and I am working to vacate almost all those summons warrants. We should be doing that in the next 2 weeks or so. We have to make sure that those cases there's no public safety value in those cases, right? They come into the system. When we stop prosecuting a small possession of marijuana cases, there's a tremendous expense to taxpayers, but there's also a tremendous expense to individual people who have to spend time in central booking and become criminalized. So I support ending broken windows policing, and I say that not as a candidate, but someone who's serving as the district attorney of Brooklyn.
Gotcha. So Ms. Jameau, decline to prosecute all broken windows offenses?
The bottom line is this: the broken windows policy has disproportionately impacted Black and brown Latino people in our community, and that is a problem. So when they enter into the criminal justice system, I'm going to be evaluating those cases that come from the broken windows policy. I will be diverting or dismissing.
Mr. Gentile.
Well, certainly, are there too many cases, too many low-level first offender cases that come into the system? Yes. And those are the cases I will not prosecute. But to make a mandatory declination of prosecution is the same as making mandatory minimum sentences. So I would do it on an individual basis based on the skill and analysis of the assistant DAs.
Okay, and Soren?
Let's be honest about what we're talking about. When people say we're going to refer those cases to, for example, the theft of services, the fare beats, to the tab or the summons part, that continues to penalize poverty. Because if a person cannot pay to go into the subway, that person can't pay the fine at the tab bureau. So let's be honest about what we're talking about here. And so what I say is that no, we should not be prosecuting those broken windows cases, but referring them to a system that continues to penalize poverty is not the answer. And I think that we need to be honest about the conversation that we're having. For example, in the theft of services issue, they actually said that 25% of those cases will remain in the criminal courts. Why is that? Well, they'll say maybe because it's a recidivist. If I'm homeless and I can't pay day 1, I am homeless and I can't pay day 20 either. So let's talk about that in an honest way and in a comprehensive way. And no, I would not penalize poverty, and yes, I would not prosecute the broken windows cases.
Okay. That was a yes, you would decline that prosecution, Mr. Friedman.
My answer is yes as well. My list, I think you want specifics, I think the crowd does, includes possession of syringes, which the public health concerns demand that we be allowed to have so that people are not harming themselves further who are trying to go through transition on certain drug issues, and certain kinds of possession of certain kinds of knives that have been clearly shown to be disproportionately utilized as bases to put young men of color in jail. Think what we could do with the resources that we would be able to use if we shifted them toward the violent crimes that are of great concern to everybody and stopped charging people with these ridiculous offenses, many of them survival crimes like turnstiles that affect the homeless. And by the way, members of the LGBTQ community, of which I am a proud member. The other thing that I wanted to say is that if the district attorney, the acting district attorney, his answer was yes, and he's the only person on this panel that's in a position to be doing it today, why is he just considering it and looking at it? Why isn't he doing it today?
You were directly referenced. Do you want a minute?
Sure, no, I have no problem answering it. This is about accountability. When I speak here, I speak as your DA, and I talk about the initiatives that I've done. You know, I petitioned the city council for the money to get drug counselors in my office so that we could divert drug cases out of the criminal justice system. You know, I can separate myself from the other candidates because they have no accountability. They can say what they want to say. They don't have the ability. I was the only DA out of the four other DAs after Cy Vance came forward and said, I support what he's doing, and I'm looking to do that here in Brooklyn as well. I'm going to continue to protect the people of Brooklyn, make sure that our communities are safe, and that we have a fair criminal justice system. I was the first DA in this state to hire immigration attorneys, and when I did that, all the candidates up here criticized it, saying that there would somehow be a unequal justice. In fact, all I want to do is protect people. I believe the DA's office is not simply about fighting crime, it's about improving the quality of people's lives in Brooklyn.
Okay,
that's what I'm doing.
Let's continue on this theme of the questions and concerns of immigrants. So with regards to immigrant rights, what kind of measures would you undertake as Brooklyn's chief prosecutor in making sure that New York has a voice that stands as a strong counterpoint to that in DC, i.e. the White House? You want to start, Ms. Jameau?
First of all, I would create a special unit that would focus on protecting and advocacy on behalf of immigrants. You know, the bottom line is that the country is at war with immigrants, and that impacts our criminal justice system in terms of people getting involved, people operating as witnesses, people actually coming forward because they have been victims. It's a problem. I would also work very closely to minimize the likelihood of people being deported for unnecessarily deported for crimes that really don't matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And what I mean by that, for low-level crimes.
Got you. Do you want to take that, Ms. Swain?
Sure. I came from Brooklyn Defenders. Brooklyn Defenders represents people who are detained for deportation. They learned and they taught me that basically when you have a lawyer and you're represented by a lawyer and you're detained for deportation, you're 80% more likely to be able to legally stay in this country. When you don't have a lawyer, you're 80% more likely to actually get deported or voluntarily leave this country. Right now, our mayor and the speaker of our city council are fighting over that representation. As a district attorney, I support being represented by a lawyer so immigrants are fairly represented. And victims who are immigrants equally need to be supported by the DA's office. Victims are fearful of coming forward. They're fearful of interacting with government agencies, even if they have a green card, because they're afraid of their immigration status. That puts us all in danger, because if they don't report a crime, the person who hurt them is out there able to hurt somebody else. So we need to be as mindful about our immigrant victims and sending people who speak their language, who are culturally competent, into the communities that they live in, into their churches, into their nail salons, into their hair salons, in order to speak to them at the places where they are, to make them not fearful of coming forward to talk about things that hurt them.
Yes, sir.
I got you. No, we're going to go to Mr. Fleetner. I just wanted to give our translator a breakdown. Mark, you're on that.
She's falling over.
Yeah.
I too, well, instead of having just an immigration fraud unit as exists now, I would have an immigration unit where there would be leadership to counsel the ADAs who are handling immigration cases. The premise is what we got back to, which is the individualized looking. Every single assistant district attorney has the moral and ethical obligation to look at the impacts on the human beings on either side of a criminal complaint. And if the impact on somebody who has immigration consequences are more dramatic than those of the others, than other individuals charged with the same offense, that has to be built in and taken into account. And that's what they would be directed
Mr. Gonzalez, you wanted to get in.
So I'm happy that the other candidates agree with the work that I started. Very clearly, I created an immigrant affairs unit in Brooklyn, and I hired immigration attorneys, and I spoke up and challenged Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump in their anti-immigrant rhetoric. I've stood up, I've wrote op-eds, I've been speaking out to try to get the immigration ICE out of the courthouse. Listen, I believe very clearly that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. What started this, and I've been talking about this since December of last year, we need to make sure that the people of Brooklyn are protected, and that includes everyone. And we're all, these are our neighbors, these are our family members, these are long-term residents of Brooklyn, and these low-level offenses that could lead to unfair deportation is something, doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or not, you need to stand by this and continue to support the work I did. You know, very few DAs across the country have stood up for immigrants. I did. And if you look at what other units are doing now across the country, they're pointing to Brooklyn as a national model of how we protect immigrants in the city.
Mr. Gentile.
And wait a second, just one thing, that because I'm close to the defense bar, that actually in the last 3 cases, the plea recommendation was not immigration sensitive, and the immigration lawyers gave the wrong plea offer to the defense attorneys. Also, there's a training program, and in the training program in the DA's office, people who are criminal and immigration lawyers are not part of that training program. I submit that if I was the district attorney, I would have lawyers who know about criminal and also who know about immigration training my attorneys, and my attorneys would not be offering the wrong pleas.
All right, Mr. Gentile, you want to?
Well, I will not be a party to ripping families apart where there are low-level crimes, nonviolent crimes. We will not be taking pleas that implicate ICE or ICE proceedings. But I would go one step further. We have to change the law in Albany on misdemeanors. Because if someone's sentenced to a 1-year misdemeanor, 365 days, they automatically have a deportation proceeding. So what we need to do to protect those people is to change the law on misdemeanors in Albany and change it from 365 days to 364 days. That takes a change in the law, but doing that will protect many, many immigrants who find themselves charged with low-level nonviolent crimes.
So this is going to be the last question of the night, but I have a lot of phenomenal questions right here in this pile, and I just wondered if you guys, on your honor, could just right now commit to at least answering these online or in some other forum for the people who spent enough of their time tonight but won't get to hear their questions asked in this forum. Yes? Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so great, thank you for that. But just the final question is, research shows that implicit bias is real. We've seen longer sentences for Black and Latino felony defendants following indictment. What steps would you take to reduce the racial disparities in our criminal justice system? That's the short answer question of the night. But in all honesty, what would you do to address that? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Gentile.
Well, first, I think what we have to do is have ADAs with better skill in picking juries that have less of a bias in those cases, because we have people of color being sentenced because we have the conviction rate is higher. And so we really need to have a better training of assistants in picking juries, because it is a skill, it's an art, and it's a skill. And that's the first thing I would do, is do a complete retraining among those ADAs.
Ms. Warren?
Well, first of all, we have to be honest who has implicit bias. There's a great test that Harvard University puts out that you can test your own implicit biases, and I would require each and every assistant DA to do that first for themselves and be honest with themselves about what those biases are. Second of all, I would make sure, and I said it in the beginning and I say it now, I would employ a statistician in my office to look at every issue, every policy, every decision to see how it is disproportionately affecting people of color. And I would make policies that would not do that, that would undermine it and retrench from that. Because the only way we're going to keep ourselves honest is if we look at those numbers and see where those cases are coming from, see who's making those arrests, and see what the DA's office is doing to contribute to the disproportionate contact of minority people in the criminal justice system.
I'm going to go to you, Ms. Jamal.
Implicit bias, that clearly impacts all of us. And the bottom line is this, it goes beyond training. This really comes down to the ethics of the office and the policy set forth by the district attorney, and understanding the sensibilities of what it is to be not a part of the status quo. Whether it is, a myriad of reasons. So the bottom line is this. It is about showing them by way of leadership. See, I think that a lot of times what happens is that the prosecutors in the system, they remove themselves from the people they serve, and that's a problem. And the most important thing in all of this is to connect the district attorney's office with the community. So they gotta understand that when somebody loses their baby, doesn't matter what color they are. When someone loses their life or someone's arrested, it doesn't matter what color they are, but we know it does when it comes to sentencing. So it is about looking at these cases individually and understanding where the community is. It's connecting community with prosecution.
I'm coming to you, Mr. Fleetner.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, in my talk since late January when I announced, I've been talking to so many community members who miss the DA's office in the community because everything's really focused at 350 J Street now. That is a problem. But there's a couple of other really basic things that have always concerned me. I love the idea of statistical analysis. It's part of my platform as well. But in addition, first of all, we need to be hiring and keeping people of all the cultures that represent Brooklyn in the office, and that's something that's simply not happening. All of those people have got to be exposed, and not just the assistant district attorneys, the whole staff, to ongoing cultural competency training that impacts on everything they do. And that includes, and I'm looking at the seconds that I have, the implicit bias that takes place when judges make decisions. The ADAs and all of the staff needs to be educating judges who bring a lot of implicit bias to all of the decisions that they make and forcing them to acknowledge the impacts of those decisions.
To you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Well, if we're going to continue to try to address mass incarceration and reduce our reliance on jail, we have to all take ownership of our own prejudices. And implicit biases is really about people's prejudices. One of the things that I've done, and I plan to have a very transparent district attorney's office, is we've been talking with Harvard University to have them come in and look through our cases and do a implicit bias examination of where the sentences or the recommendations, the outcomes of these cases have been different based on socioeconomic factors and racial factors. And when we have that study done, we'll have a real way to train. We have done implicit bias training for the entire staff, but we need to really open our doors and look at the transparency by letting an outside agency come and looking at all the cases in Brooklyn. We know there are problems, but we have to identify them so we can get the right solutions.
So I want to thank you guys for walking with us through this last 2 hours. But before we get out of here, I want to give each of our candidates a chance to address you uninterrupted and really make their pitch for why they should be Brooklyn's next district attorney. I'm going to start with candidate Jamo. 1 minute.
Got it. Listen, this is a critical time in our county, and justice must matter for everyone. It is clear that what we cannot do is ride on the coattails of our good friend Ken Thompson when it helps us, and when it is a critical moment, hide and say, no, it has nothing to do with me. That's a problem. That goes to accountability. Accountability matters, and that's why I believe it is essential that in dealing with the wrongfully convicted and dealing with those cases, we must have an independent commission to look at the actions of what went on in those cases. Transparency is key. This is about building the trust. This is about understanding within the community that you don't just sit up high on the 19th floor, but you're with the community. Because at the end of the day, the district attorney must serve the community. We must work in partnership. Our children, our future matters. And I leave you with this. The next district attorney will, in fact, impact the next generation of Black and brown youth. And that should matter to each and every one of you.
Mr. Fleedner, it's your moment.
This is an extraordinarily important decision that you have to make on September 12th. Don't forget to get registered and get out and vote. It is an honor to address you on these critical issues. To get back to where I started, interestingly, in the context of this discussion today, the acting district attorney admitted to you, in his reference to the police commissioner's take on the Akai Gurley case, that politics has impacted on the decisions that he has made. And we see that over and over and over again, and you need to say no to that. To answer Ms. Peterson's question directly, I will give you, I wrote it down, so I want to get it right, what I want for my family, and more importantly, I will give you what I want for your families. And the walk that I have taken and the walk that I have made over 30 years, including in the context of those recent events, is proof that I'm not playing, that I'm serious. I want equal justice. I want us to send a message, starting in Brooklyn, throughout the city, and to the nation. It can be done.
Mr. Gonzalez, you have a moment.
I've dedicated my life to making sure that Brooklyn remains and continues to get better, to be a safer place to raise our families and to live. I'm also committed to making sure that there's equal justice for everyone. One of the things that I've seen in my lifetime, having lived in the neighborhoods that I've lived in Williamsburg, Bushwick, and East New York, is that we feel that the criminal justice system doesn't often have our best interest in heart. As your DA, the actions that I've taken is step by step to improve the lives of the people that we represent in the criminal justice system. I've been diverting young people out the criminal justice system, I've been reforming our bail system, and I've been making improvements in the overall operation of the DA's office. I want you to really think back what the DA's office was like in 2010, 11, 12, and 13, and look at where we're at now. That's happened while I was the #2 person in the DA's office, and for basically the last years I've been running that office. And I'm asking you to continue to support me and work with me to build the best criminal justice system we can for all the people of Brooklyn.
And Swarren.
You have asked some of the best questions that we've been asked this entire campaign, and I thank you for it. And it's because of your commitment to your groups and your constituencies that you've done that. And I thank you because you're asking hard questions. And I will say this to you, that people have said, well, you're all former assistant district attorneys. What separates you? I will tell you this. What separates me is that I was the only person to work for a public defender. I was the only person who represented people who could not afford a lawyer at immigration cases, in family cases, in housing cases, and in criminal cases. And that opens your eyes to justice. It opens your eyes to people who can't afford to pay for a private lawyer and what they're facing in a criminal justice system, because they are facing an uphill battle, and they are facing the extraordinary power of a district attorney. I started my statement by saying we, as district attorney, hold the most power in the criminal justice system to affect change. I have the 4 pillars of that change to affect so that Rikers could be closed, so that we decrease disproportionate contact with the criminal justice system, that we improve the situation for minorities, and that we create a more just system so everybody will want to participate. People want to sit on juries, people will want to come forward as witnesses, and we will have a safer and more just Brooklyn.
All right, and the last moment is for candidates.
Well, thank you. This actually has been the most passionate crowd we've had throughout the whole campaign, and that's a good thing. If I haven't said it before, let me say it again. We need to get a handle on the narcotics, opioid deaths that are occurring, that are soaring in Brooklyn. More deaths from overdoses than homicides and car collisions put together. We need a fully staffed narcotics investigations unit that will intercept those drugs before they hit the streets of Brooklyn. But we talk about how we're set apart. I identify as the only independent person from the Brooklyn DA's office in this race. I'm the only one, like Ken Thompson, that can come in as an independent without fear or favor. No connection, no ties to the DA's office, no ties to the prosecutors, no ties to the detectives, no ties to the cases. Like Ken Thompson, I could call it the way it is. I have no loyalties within the DA's office. If you're concerned about what is going to happen with the other cases that have not been discovered, wrongful convictions, you need to have an independent person, not only a commission, but an independent person as the next Brooklyn District Attorney.
So that is going to wrap up the forum. Once again, there are Mark Fleetner, Ann Swern, Vincent Gentili, Eric Gonzalez, and Ahmad Jamo. Thank you to the people at Vocal New York and all of their partners. Thank you to St. Francis for hosting us. You can catch the live, you can catch the rebroadcast of this evening again on BRIC TV tomorrow from 9 until 11. Primary day is Tuesday, September 12th. Election day is November 7th. We'll see you at the polls. Thank you. Good evening.
Yeah.